Well, we're excited today for our guest, someone that we always love to talk to and get his opinion on world affairs, particularly the matters of foreign policy and monetary policy. We have with us Dr. Ron Paul. How you doing, sir?
Doing well, David. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. And of course, I wanted to have you on because it's election season. We're right here on the precipice of another presidential election. And I wanted to get Dr. Ron Paul's take on where things stand right now. I see that it seems like more and more the Republican politics, at least the policies that are stated, the proposals to the voters sound more and more like what I remember hearing from you all the way back in 2007 in the primaries of the Republican Party back then for president.
Yeah, and maybe the country is moving in the right direction. We have a lot of people now are, in polling, they find out they don't trust the government, and all that is very good. But the one thing that all of us should be concerned about is the integrity of the process. And I'm not overconfident. Oh, they've turned over a new leaf. Everybody's going to be counted. It's going to be a fair election. So I don't think over the centuries, matter of fact, or at least many years, even in this country, there were shenanigans going on all the time. But I think recently it's been a mess, and the way I see this is the country's bankrupt morally and financially. So the people who are in power, in order to maintain their empire, they have to lie through their teeth,
Yeah.
in order to do that. And so I think it's the process of our system disintegrating and listening to it. So I assume, like most people in this country right now, assume, but Trump's going to be doing all right. It looks like he'll be able to pull it off. But then again, you keep hearing reports. And if you look at it, it isn't just you and I that might be questioning this these days. A lot of people do it in a way that's healthy because they have to ask more questions. But this is the difficulty I have. But still, we have to wait and see what's going to happen. But generally speaking, I always argue the case that, and this is not as true with this election. I always say, yeah, you have Republicans and Democrats running against each other. And I've been watching the first election I remember, Wendell Willkie, 1940. And there's always these promises and things. I says, we end up doing the same thing, same foreign policy, same monetary policy, deficit continued to explode. And so I'm a cynic in that sense that I don't expect magic, even if there's a lot of resentment going on. But I still think that we need to go through the process and get our message out on if you get serious, this is what we ought to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was pretty cool to see Elon Musk, the world's richest man, said he wants to get in there and cut $2 trillion at least. I said that reminds me of Dr. Paul back on the debate stage. You saying we're going to cut $1 trillion out of the budget. He's already at the two. Maybe it's because of the inflation. We got to say 2 trillion now, right?
Yeah, a position is easy to
Yeah.
hold, but the truth is, what if I did get in this position and all I had to do is sign a piece of paper and the Federal Reserve was eliminated, or you cut the budget by $2 trillion. Well, what the consequence would be is total chaos and
Yeah.
probably civil war and
Yeah.
all that. That's why I spend a lot of time, and I know you try to get the message out on what we should believe in and the principles that's important. People are going to have to know why. After this thing falls apart, I think we have an opportunity. The cultural Marxists do it on purpose. More chaos, the better. We'll
Yeah.
rebuild it in their side. But it is going to cave in. But we ought to say, yeah, it is. But you ought to look at the options that we have, and I think what we do in our conversations and radio and all blogging and all this, is to get the message out
Yeah.
of the philosophy that can solve these problems. And I remain a reluctant optimist that there are people out there now. From my experience in the last 20 some years in politics, especially in the presidential races, that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of young people that seem to be very receptive to what we've been talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm one of them. I'm 35. I was 18 when I first started helping your campaign here in Florida and the primaries in 2008, I guess, or 2007. And so we've come a long way since then. You know, back then, the things that you were espousing were very, very novel for a lot of the folks in the Republican and conservative and independents. But now it's become a lot of it kind of entrenched. It's just a matter of can it actually get done. And any, there's just so many forces against so many of the things that people need. There's a big pushback when you get into the halls of power, as you know. But I have to stay optimistic like you, because what's the point of being pessimistic? If you think you're going to lose, you will lose. If you think you might win, you might win. So you might as well stay positive, right?
Or you will be compelled to leave.
Yeah.
And that never entered my mind, but I'm very sympathetic to the people who can and want to and are still able to do
Yeah.
it. But that's never been on my agenda, and for practical reasons, if nothing else. I mean, I'm not anxious to sort of desert my family. I have a large family.
Yeah.
I feel some responsibility and energy to be near the family, so that's not on my agenda. But it's the agenda of trying to change people's minds, very, very much of interest to me. And that's where I think the change has occurred. I was influenced a whole lot by, you probably have heard me say since you've been around a while, I always so frequently mentioned Leonard Read, who started the Foundation for Economic Education. And he had techniques, but he had a philosophy, and he was a gentleman. And he sort of got organized as the empire started being building after World War II, and he has had a lot of influence. And I think people like Lou Rockwell, with the visas, tremendous benefits from that. That wasn't available. I remember when I first went into Congress in the 70s, and I wasn't looking for a fight, with people and argument, but a lot of them would come up and say, I've never heard about this stuff. And like Vance the other day, his comment that we caught was, I'm not really one of those Ron Paul people, but it makes sense on this monetary policy. You know what I thought about? Well, if you come around on the monetary thing, you're challenging the whole system. How does everything get financed? Wars are financed, the welfare state, the medical, all the special interests. And when the people learn that it's a ripoff and printing money and inflation, is fraud, it's corruption, and it is a tax. It's an enslavement of the people until the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, for sure. I was wondering, I saw that Elon had interacted with you on Twitter about your ideas for cutting. Would you ever be an advisor for him if Trump got in there and put Elon in charge of looking for wasteful spending? Would you help him if he asked you?
Oh, I would, but it would be, everybody would know what I believe.
Yeah.
There'd be no secrets, and I think no, they would, but I wouldn't want an official position. Because I'm sort of steered away from getting too involved in the politics of it all right now, and I want, and I'm trying to approach this to try to get, especially the young people, because they've been open more so than I always say. Young people that were in high school and college when I was doing all the campaigning, I had a receptive audience. I said it wasn't like the Chamber of Commerce people, so I used that as a derogative thing. Chamber of Commerce people meant the ones that have are lobbying Congress for more monies for the cities.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question. Another figure that's touted to be with this coalition Trump's got, and who knows what's going to happen of it. I look at it the same way. I don't really look at it on what's actually going to be feasible to happen, but rather what these things represent in terms of the education of the people. And Kennedy RFK Jr. I know you know him, and he's been touted as someone who's going to really go after the corruption and crony stuff going on with FDA and CDC and all of that, even the USDA. And we'll see what comes of it. But I was, one of the things that he's emphasized, but I've been struck by. I interviewed a scientist, a late scientist named Dr. Ray Peat many times on my radio broadcast, and he would always talk about these additives that they put into food products, these vegetable oils, and all these little gums and things that really impair your gut and impair your mind. You get all these mental health disorders and everything. Do you see some of these things as almost tantamount when they're subsidized by government as a kind of form of a deliberate attack on the people to keep them dumbed down so they don't want to rise up? I mean,
Yes. I think what you're talking about is something that I've experienced because I graduated from medical school in 1960, and it was very conventional then. And there was, they frowned on holistic ideas, that they avoided it, even just vitamins they didn't want to talk about. So my whole philosophy has changed, and I do my best to try to understand exactly the difference on diets and all. I always was a natural sort of fanatic on exercises because my kids always said, well, no, they'd have something wrong. I said, go exercise, go walk or something,
yeah,
work it out. But I think that my philosophy on medicine has dramatically changed. And as a matter of fact, in the last, even since COVID,
yeah,
some of this stuff is worse. The more I learn about it,
yeah.
and I'm starting to think, well, I can't reject them. I'm going to have to listen to these people because they've made more sense, especially in the COVID situation.
Yeah. It just seems like it's not just those drugs that they rolled out for that. It's actually the things they put in the food that act as a kind of weapon to dumb down the population. So you're so mentally fatigued, you can't even comprehend what's being done to you, nor do you have the energy to do anything about it. You're just trying to get through the day, you know? That's
Yeah,
a
but
nice way to treat people as peasants or slaves if you want.
yeah, but what happens when you combine that with a violation of our civil liberties?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you have to wear this mask. So we have the idiocy of one person walking down the beach with his mask on, being
Yeah.
very obese. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole thing was nuts,
Yeah.
and yet you could lose your not your driver's license, your doctor's license by not going capitulating and going along with this. And a lot of people not only they could lose their license, but they lost their jobs. They might have been researchers, and then they decided they wouldn't even what they did. They violated a discussion, in science.
Yeah.
And I actually, when I went through medical school, there was much more emphasis on and having open discussions,
Yeah.
about these issues. And then when you had the pharmaceutical industry taking over, because of course they were an industrial complex and they had to depend on the government, so they became the manipulators, and then they would capitulate and start endorsing things that were just wrong. Uh, but I think there's people waking up right now. That's why Robert Kennedy would be so important. But tell you the truth, I worry about that too because of the aggressiveness of the people that don't like him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've already had several attempts on Trump's life, and of course, Kennedy has been threatened because for a long time, denied protection from the Secret Service. It's a mess what they've got out here, but it shows you that we may be actually getting to touch some of the nerves of the deep state when you find
Yeah.
this kind of aggression going on. And so it's at the same time, it's kind of a good thing that they're getting a little bit desperate, but it could be very, very scary. What do you think if there was one political change? I mean, I know you've talked about sometimes bring the troops home. We wish we could do that. I don't think the deep state will let anybody stay alive that tries to do that, unfortunately. But for the people's protection, would the one thing I was thinking maybe you would suggest, if you could just do one thing to help the public with this coming crash, would it be to repeal taxes on gold and silver so people could have a hedge against the crash of the dollar? Would that be the
Uh,
best step, the
Oh yeah,
simplest step?
well, there's good movement on that. I had a young man on my program the other day that is sort of an organizer of this, and there's several states, 6 or 8 states, and and they have already passed legislation and got rid of the taxes, the sales tax and the capital gains tax. Yes, I think that's very important. In a way, we see all the negatives that have happened and what these Fed actually does. But in 1971 is when they closed the gold window and things deteriorated like crazy. But by 1975, it was that was leading up to our gold commission. What they decided then was that people could own gold again.
Yeah.
Just think that that's a big thing. It was
Yeah.
for 42 years, and I was thinking more than half when I was younger, more than half of my life. Our country, you weren't even allowed to own gold,
Yeah.
and I think ownership of gold, and that's why one thing that I like to do because I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm maybe a survivalist advisor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have this, some coinage, and the more the merrier. Because the same way is we still have a Second Amendment. They're always trying to get it, but the more people who understand that, the better off we'll be. Let's just hope it never gets that bad. Well, where that's so crucial. But the money is going to be crucial, and trying to survive will be. Because the one thing that I work on is that I am convinced there will be a liquidation. The liquidation of the debt, the $35 trillion, might go to 45 or something, but it will be liquidated because it's already being liquidated. Because every time you increase your inflation rate, the dollar goes down in value, so you're paying off with cheaper dollars. So it's a boon to the government too, because the debt they're holding becomes worth less. So I think that's a big thing that we have to do. The liquidation of all the debt, when the big crunch comes, but also malinvestment. There's been just since 2008, this tremendous QE and all this other stuff. There's been a lot of investments that once this thing starts to unwind, sort of like unwinding the pyramid, and that's going to be it's going to be necessary, even though they might look like, well, they were all good investments. Some
Yeah.
of them might be, some might survive, but some of those investments were based in the pyramid, and they wouldn't have made those investments if you wouldn't have had the destruction of the most important pricing system ever, and that is interest rate. Interest rates are crucial if you want to have a market economy, and we still don't have that. That's the tool the Fed uses to manipulate everybody.
So would being able to, like some of the things you talked about before, repeal legal tender laws, allow people to trade gold and silver as a kind of alternative to the dollar, is that something that you think would be the best, quickest way to off ramp families who don't want to be tied to that sinking ship of the dollar?
Yeah, but right now, if you did it, there wouldn't be enough people that really would understand that. But I'm still for that. I just don't think if we did that tomorrow, that all of a sudden everybody would understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So I try to narrow it down to the role of government. I decided to tell people, well, if they're coming up with some crazy scheme in Washington, you always ask every time anybody talks about it or are going to vote on it, ask them, where do you get your authority? They don't have any authority to boast of all that spending. And I said, and where are you going to get the money? And of course, we're broke. There's no money in the bank. Government has no money. They have to steal it.
Yeah.
And if we narrow it down to that I think would take care of the rest, because I think there's Mises talked about a crack up boom, and that's when people anything of real value they want to cash in on, and they get rid of it and spend it, and it's really chaos. But that's sort of like what Venezuela and Zimbabwe they go through. I keep hoping that we won't get that bad, but we could. And that the big thing there is the conflict between rich and poor, because the system we have now is designed to really tax the middle class and the poor, because the wealthy they do quite well in the early stages, and we're still in the early stages, and you have then more billionaires and more trillionaires under these circumstances. And I think that's social conflict, financial differences between the rich and the poor. That might be our biggest problem that we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's the one that seems to be always lurking in the shadows, that class warfare concept. It seems with Trump's movement, he's been able to get record numbers of Hispanics and blacks and Asians kind of uniting with white working class folks. And that's a good sign because you don't want to have people fighting with tribalism and so forth. Do you see that as kind of a good thing that we can stop fighting, politics based on race and start uniting over bigger issues, bigger values like pride in a country or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And that's why I resent and I don't like it, because everything is divided by race. Whether you're looking at the race, what are the blacks doing? What are the Hispanics doing? What are the Asians doing?
Yeah.
On and on. And I want to know what the individual's going. Liberty is individual. It's not because the other day somebody was on the air saying, Trump is going to destroy women's rights.
Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't even talk about women's rights. You should talk about every individual being treated the same. You should have no benefits and no punishments for groups of people. And it's the individual that has a natural right to life and liberty, not because they belong to a group.
How do you think we get people, in closing, to believe in the importance of the individual without something transcendent? Trump tries to say it's all about America, 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 pride in the nation. But some people might say, no, you got to get to religion. That's what makes us believe in the individual. What do you think it is that will help people believe in that again as a principle they truly can unite around? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I have some beliefs along those lines. I don't necessarily use the word religion as much of, but I do believe that it's spiritual. I believe in natural law, and you can go to the very, very first indication of history, way back, and people recognized a natural law that was superior to anything the government could do. And our founders understood that, and they tried to embed that in our Constitution. That for instance, all societies in recorded history seem to have recognized that you shouldn't kill people, and you shouldn't lie to people, and you should lie, cheat, or kill. And that has been well known. So it is a spiritual thing, but people immediately want to say, well, government has to stay out of it. This is a personal thing. People should be willing to look at. The Napolitanos have been very good on this issue, natural law, and where our rights come from, and that I think is one of the most important things, to start there instead of what kind of a government we're going to have.
Right, for sure. Well, I really appreciate your time, and it's been great to have you weigh in on some of the matters of the election. It's crazy out there, and all the stuff, World War III, all these scary things, but you just got to keep day by day doing what you can to spread joy and positive values. So, on behalf of a lot of my listeners as well as myself, I want to say thank you for all you've done, because you're still doing it. You could just, Trump always says, I don't have to be doing this. I could be on a beach somewhere. And I say, well, Ron Paul, he could be having a nice relaxing time, but you're still at it every day, no matter what, trying to spread the message. And that really means a lot to people. So thank you.
Well, I tell you what, if I couldn't do this, I'd be miserable. So it's something and I tell people, you should enjoy what you're doing and go to meetings and things like that. When you have rallies, and it looks like the Trump people have a pretty good time. But being serious about the philosophy is also crucial.
Well, I think it would be a good thing for the country if we could see maybe Dr. Ron Paul come into a meeting with Elon Musk live and see him get to work cutting the government. That'd be a wonderful thing.
Not likely, but I'm always thinking about those issues.
All right. Take care. Thank you for your time, sir. Dr. Ron Paul, everyone. And check out the Ron Paul Liberty Report, which is available on the Rumble channel, Ron Paul Liberty Report. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, David.